He was just a newborn foal, shaking beside his mother's body in the cold dawn. But when a rancher took him home, and 4 loyal dogs surrounded him like a lost pup, the world's strangest pack was born. What happened next would change everything. Scientists thought they knew about identity, instinct, and the unconditional power of love. Because this wasn't just a rescue, this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The morning air cut sharp, the kind that bit through denim and made old fence posts groan. Evan Moore shifted his weight on the saddle, narrowing his eyes against the wind. The storm had passed overnight, but the land still wore its scars: broken branches, waterlogged ditches, and a low-hanging fog that clung like grief. He almost turned back. Almost. But then he heard it. A sound no man could ignore, not out here. High-pitched, hoarse, and desperate. Not a scream, not a cry, something in between. Something alive. He turned his horse toward the ravine, every hoofstep crunching over frost-hardened grass. The sound came again, closer now. Evan dismounted near a fallen log and stepped forward, careful not to slip on the wet slope. That's when he saw it. A mare, motionless. Her body, half-curled, belly still distended, and beside her, trembling on newborn legs, was a foal. The colt's coat was still damp, gold with streaks of gray, his legs too long for his body, his breath shallow. He stood because instinct told him to. But there was nothing else left in him. No mother to nuzzle, no herd to answer his cries. Just silence, and cold. Evan crouched, heart tightening. "You're too new for this world, little one," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. The foal turned toward the sound. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but a strange, exhausted trust. He didn't resist as Evan slipped off his coat, wrapped it around his narrow body, and hoisted him into his arms. His head lolled against Evan's chest, breath fogging the man's collar. The ride back was slow, careful. Evan laid the colt across the truck seat, bracing him with an old feed sack so he wouldn't roll. He kept a hand on the foal's side the entire time, feeling the thin chest rise and fall. He didn't know what the odds were. He just knew they weren't good. Back at the ranch, the dogs barked once, then fell silent as Evan stepped into the barn. Moose, the Great Dane, approached first, head low, ears forward. Behind him came Pepper, Milo, and Sugar, their paws ticking softly on the concrete. "Easy now," Evan said. He placed the colt down on a blanket near the heater, uncapped a fresh bottle, and began warming formula with hands that moved faster than they should have at his age. The foal stirred, lifted his head slightly, and then something unexpected happened. Sugar lay down beside him, then Milo, then Pepper. Moose stood guard. The foal let out a soft rasping sound, not a neigh, not quite a whinny. Just a beginning. The barn smelled of hay, damp wood, and formula. Evan sat cross-legged on an old feed bag, cradling the bottle like it was something sacred. The foal's mouth fumbled against the rubber nipple, his small body shivering as he drank. Each swallow was a victory, each blink a promise he wasn't giving up. Around them, the dogs formed a loose circle, not a bark, not a growl, just quiet observation. Moose, the Great Dane, lowered himself to the colt's level, big head tilting, as if trying to understand what this strange long-legged creature was. Pepper, ever the herder, paced once around the perimeter, then settled beside Evan. Sugar stretched out on her belly, ears perked, and Milo, smallest of them all, tucked himself against the foal's side without waiting for permission. Evan didn't say much. He just kept feeding, eyes flicking between the bottle and the colt's eyes. They were clearer now, less wild, less lost. After the feeding, Evan wiped the foal's mouth and gently pulled the blanket tighter around him. The colt gave a soft sigh, then lowered himself down, not in the awkward sprawl most horses used, but a slow, uncertain curl, mimicking Sugar. Evan chuckled. "Well, kid, that's not exactly how your kind usually beds down." But no one corrected him. Sugar nudged closer. Milo wriggled into the crook behind the colt's back. Pepper dropped her head across the foal's shoulder, and Moose, gentle giant that he was, lay just behind them all, like a wall of warmth. Evan watched the pile of bodies breathing in sync, his boots still wet from the ravine, a horse sleeping in a dog heap, a dog licking a colt's nose, and somehow, it felt right. "I guess you've got yourself a pack," he murmured. That night, Evan didn't close the barn door. He watched from the kitchen window instead, coffee going cold in his hands. At first glance, it looked like any other night. His dogs curled in their usual spot near the heater, but there, tucked between Sugar's flank and Moose's ribs, was a golden colt with a white star on his head. He named him Jasper the next morning. It just felt right, like a stone you'd find in a riverbed, weathered but shining. And from that day on, there were 4 dogs, and 1 horse who didn't know he wasn't one of them. It started with a scratch. One lazy afternoon, Evan sat on the porch, boots up, watching the dogs roll in the dirt. Jasper stood nearby, legs longer now, coat thicker. He watched them, head tilted, ears flicking. Then, slowly, awkwardly, he bent his neck and dragged a hind hoof up toward his shoulder, trying to scratch behind his ear the way Pepper did. He toppled over, like a newborn fawn. Moose barked once. Milo ran in circles, yipping with glee. Jasper scrambled back to his feet, shook off the dust, and tried again. This time, he almost nailed it. Evan laughed so hard he spilled his coffee. That was the day Jasper officially started his dog lessons. By week's end, the pack had a 5th member, who followed in perfect formation. They trotted down the gravel path together, Moose in the lead, Pepper flanking left, Milo weaving between legs, Sugar watching the rear, and Jasper, enormous and earnest, trying to keep up without stepping on anyone. When Evan filled the dog bowls at mealtime, Jasper stood patiently behind Milo, waiting his turn. No whinny, no stomp, just wide eyes and a soft snort when it was his turn for the bottle. He never tried to eat from the bowls. He knew the rules, and he respected the order. Fetch was his favorite. Evan threw a tennis ball. Sugar took off, Pepper hot on her heels. Jasper galloped behind, faster than all of them, but unsure what to do when he got there. He'd nudge the ball with his nose, then awkwardly try to pick it up. Sometimes he'd grab it. Sometimes he'd just carry a mouthful of grass back, proud as anything. Either way, he dropped it at Evan's boots, like it was treasure. At night, they curled into their usual pile, Moose on his side, Milo stretched across his belly, Sugar and Pepper tucked in close, and Jasper legs folded beneath him, head resting on Moose's shoulder, tail swishing in slow contentment. But the strangest part, the part Evan could never quite believe, was the tail wagging. Not quite a wag, really, more of a swish. But when Evan called his name, when he reached out a hand or praised him like he would the dogs, Jasper would lift his chin and swish his tail side to side, slow and deliberate, as if he understood, as if he belonged. Evan leaned against the fence one evening, watching Jasper nap with Pepper curled between his front legs. "You've got no idea you're different, do you?" he said softly. Jasper twitched an ear, nothing more, but the question lingered, like dust in the air. What happens when this horse who thinks he's a dog meets the rest of his kind? By 6 months, Jasper had legs like fence posts and a chest broad enough to cast shadows across the yard. He'd outgrown every blanket. Evan tried to wrap him in, but not his place in the pack. If anything, his bond with the dogs had only deepened, especially with Moose. The two were nearly inseparable now. Moose with his slow, thunderous gait, and Jasper mimicking it beside him, hooves clopping in time with the Dane's padded paws. Wherever the pack went, Jasper followed, through the orchard, across the pasture, even along the fence line at sunrise, where they made their rounds like sentries. It started as a game, but one morning, it got serious. A delivery truck rolled up the long dirt drive, tires spitting gravel. Jasper, mid-chew on a tennis ball, froze. Moose lifted his head, Sugar barked once, Pepper shot forward, Milo yipped, and Jasper, he dropped the ball, pawed the ground once, and let out a noise that wasn't quite a bark, wasn't quite a whinny, just a guttural, confused bark nicker that made the chickens scatter. Then he squared off beside Moose, shoulders stiff, tail high, ears pinned like a ranch dog on alert. The driver slowed, then stopped entirely when he saw the animal lineup: one Great Dane, 2 mid-sized dogs, a beagle, and a horse who seemed to be growling. Evan stepped out of the barn, just in time to see the delivery man reverse halfway down the driveway before bolting out of the cab. "Sir, you've got a situation by your gate," he called out, waving a clipboard. Evan laughed so hard he nearly dropped the feed sack. "That's just Jasper," he said, taking the paperwork. "World's largest beagle." From that day on, Jasper took his role seriously. He'd pace the fence with Pepper, sniff the ground where raccoons had passed, and stand guard by the porch with Moose during thunderstorms. When Evan called the dogs in for dinner, Jasper came too, head high, tail flicking like a victory flag. He even learned how to sit, not well, not gracefully, but he'd lower his haunches like moose, legs folding awkwardly, his long body trembling with the effort. Evan clapped every time, laughing like a proud father. Jasper soaked it up. "You're a mess," Evan said one evening, brushing dust off his snout. "But you're our mess." That night, Evan watched from the porch as Jasper did one last loop of the property. Moose flanked him, Milo darted ahead, Pepper trotted in a tight arc, and Sugar brought up the rear. 5 tails, 1 pack, and a horse who had no idea he wasn't supposed to be part of it. The sun was just breaking over the ridge, painting the pasture in a soft gold. Dew clung to the grass like a second skin. Jasper trotted along the fence line with his usual bounce, Sugar at his side, Milo weaving around his legs, Pepper scouting ahead. Moose brought up the rear like a tank on patrol. That's when Jasper stopped, mid-stride, head up, ears forward. Across the fence, in the neighbor's field, stood a dozen horses, tall, muscular, gleaming in the morning light like statues that breathed. One lifted its head and let out a long, melodic whinny. Jasper's ears twitched. He didn't answer. Instead, he barked, a high-pitched, broken sound, half neigh, half dog yelp. The horses across the way went still. Then a chestnut mare snorted, and a gray gelding trotted a few steps forward, curious. Jasper looked back at Pepper, confused. Then he crouched, not like a horse about to roll, like a dog about to play. Forelegs splayed, rear end high, tail flicking like a flag in the breeze. His giant hooves dug into the dirt as he bounced once, inviting the strangers to chase him. The other horses just stared. Evan had been mending the side gate, but the tension in the air pulled his eyes up. He followed Jasper's line of sight, then slowly stood. He didn't call out, didn't move, just watched. Jasper trotted along the fence, trying to mirror the herd, but it didn't click. He dipped his head to sniff noses, then tried to nuzzle the chestnut's shoulder, but too fast, too rough. She sidestepped him and pinned her ears. Jasper backed up, confused. Another whinny echoed from the field. Jasper didn't respond. He turned to Moose and let out a bark nicker, as if asking, "What do I do?" Moose didn't answer. He just stood between Jasper and the fence, tail low. That's when it hit Evan, like a slap of cold water. Jasper didn't know what he was, didn't understand the language of ears and hooves, of slow sniffs and sideways steps. He was trying heart wide open, tail wagging, tongue lolling like Milo's when he ran too long in the sun, but he wasn't getting it, because they weren't barking, they weren't his pack. Back in the barn that night, Jasper didn't pile in with the dogs. He stood near the stall door, staring out toward the dark pasture, still, quiet, head low. Evan walked up and gently touched his shoulder. "It's okay, bud," he whispered. "You're not lost, you're just one of a kind." Jasper turned, nudged Evan's side, then curled up beside Sugar and Milo, but even as his body relaxed, his eyes stayed open, watching the fence, wondering. The mare's name was Willow, a soft-eyed palomino with years behind her and patience to spare. Evan had borrowed her from a friend across the ridge, said she was calm enough to eat hay with a tornado. If any horse could ease Jasper into his own kind, it was her. Evan led her into the round pen just after sunrise. Jasper watched from the gate, flanked by the dogs, tail flicking nervously. "You ready, boy?" Evan asked, unhooking the gate. Jasper hesitated, then stepped in. At first, it looked promising. He trotted forward, head high, curious. Willow turned to face him and gave a soft, welcoming nicker. Jasper froze. Then, in true dog fashion, he dipped into a play bow, forelegs out, rump in the air, tail swinging. He gave a short bark nicker and bounded toward her, tongue flicking out like Milo's when he begged for scraps. Willow blinked, then pinned her ears. Jasper didn't notice. He did what Pepper always did when meeting someone new. He trotted behind her for a sniff, the wrong kind. Willow spun fast, her back leg shot out, a warning more than an attack. But it connected, not hard, not mean, just enough. Jasper squealed and stumbled backward, heart in his throat. He ran, not toward the gate, but straight to Pepper, burying his head against her side, like a scolded pup. Pepper licked his ear. Moose stood between Jasper and Willow now, tense but still. Sugar growled low, protective. Milo paced in frantic circles. Evan stepped in slowly, hand out. "Easy," he murmured. "Nobody's mad." Willow had already relaxed, grazing like nothing had happened. She hadn't meant harm, she'd just been a horse. But Jasper didn't understand. Evan knelt beside him, brushing dust off his shoulder. The colt's eyes were wide, not just from fear, but something deeper, something breaking. He wasn't like them, not the dogs, not the horses, just floating in between. You did fine, Evan whispered. You were just being you. But Jasper didn't move, didn't play, didn't try again. That night, back in the barn, he didn't curl up in the usual spot. He stood alone in the corner, ears low, eyes distant. The dogs didn't crowd him, they just stayed near, like they knew. And Evan stood by the door longer than usual, watching the colt who barked like a dog but flinched like a horse, who'd lost his place in the world. You'll find it, he said quietly, but the words felt hollow, because for the first time since the day he was found, Jasper didn't believe it. Kiri arrived on a quiet Tuesday. No fanfare, no trailer clatter, just a slow walk from the stock trailer to the open pasture, led by an old rancher with a hand like worn leather and a voice like wind through pine. He was a Belgian, broad-backed, honey-colored, and weathered with time. His eyes held the kind of stillness that couldn't be taught, only earned. A retired therapy horse who'd once comforted veterans and soothed children who didn't speak. Now he was here for a different mission, to help a colt who didn't know he was a horse. Jasper watched from the barn, half hidden behind Sugar and Pepper. Moose stood beside him like a statue. Clyde didn't even glance their way. He just walked to the center of the pasture, lowered his head, and began to graze. That first day, Jasper didn't approach. He barked once, testing, and Clyde didn't respond. No flinch, no snort, just a soft tail flick, as if to say, "I'll be here when you're ready." The second day, Jasper crept closer, not with confidence, not even curiosity, just wonder. He stayed behind Pepper, peeking out, steps slow and deliberate. Clyde didn't move. On the third day, Clyde lifted his head, took one step toward Jasper, and then turned, slow, deliberate, lowering his head in a gentle horse greeting. Jasper froze, then barked. Clyde said nothing, just grazed again, as if to say, "You can be you, I'll still be me. It's enough." By the end of the week, Jasper was grazing beside Clyde, awkwardly at first, taking too much grass, lifting his head after every bite like Milo did with kibble. Clyde didn't correct him, just kept chewing. Then came the nudge. One afternoon, Clyde bumped Jasper's neck with his muzzle. Not hard, not fast, just enough. Jasper flinched, then mimicked it, nuzzling back, nose pressed to Clyde's shoulder like Sugar did to Moose when the thunder rolled in. That night, he curled up with the dogs again, but closer to the barn door, where he could see Clyde. On the 10th morning, Evan stood at the fence, watching them. Clyde grazed, Jasper mirrored him. Then Clyde lifted his head and let out a soft, low whinny, barely more than a breath. Jasper watched, waited, then opened his mouth. What came out was broken, rough, strained, caught halfway between a whinny and a bark, but it was there, a sound, a beginning. Evan leaned on the rail, eyes damp, voice soft. "Well, I'll be..." The dogs didn't bark, didn't crowd him. They just watched their brother speak a new language, one he'd never known he needed. The pasture had a new rhythm now. Clyde walked with steady grace, his hooves pressing quiet prints into the earth. Jasper followed close behind, not quite in line, not quite out of step. He moved like a colt, trying to remember something he was never taught. But something was changing. Each morning, Clyde would greet the sun with a low, warm whinny, and each morning, Jasper answered, tentative at first, but stronger now. The sound still carried a rasp, a dog's urgency hidden in the edges, but it was a whinny, a real one. And yet, he didn't leave the pack. When Evan called the dogs for breakfast, Jasper trotted up with them, flanking Pepper like a loyal sibling. He waited by the trough, while the others lapped water from bowls, then nuzzled Sugar's ear with the same affection she gave him. When a stray car pulled up the drive, Jasper barked, loud and proud, hooves stomping in sync with Milo's excited dance. The mailman nearly dropped a package the first time it happened. Evan just smiled from the porch. "Still got it, don't you, boy?" In the evenings, fetch remained sacred. Clyde would graze near the fence, ears twitching in quiet amusement, as Jasper galloped after a tennis ball. Evan threw. He couldn't grip it like he used to. His mouth too long now, his teeth too large, but he'd nudge it back with his nose tail swinging in a rhythm closer to joy than instinct. And then there were the sounds. When Evan came home late one night, headlights sweeping over the barnyard, Jasper let out a bark nicker that echoed off the tin roof. Then he whinnied, then he barked again. Not confusion, not error, just both. He was speaking both languages now, switching between them, the way a child speaks to their mother one way, and their father another. There was no hesitation, no loss, just understanding. Evan leaned against the gate, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. Clyde stood beneath the old oak tree, quiet and regal. Jasper trotted toward him, then circled back to herd Sugar away from a mud puddle. He barked at her once, then whinnied a low greeting to Clyde. 2 worlds, 1 stride. Evan let out a slow breath. "You're not torn," he whispered. "You're whole." That night, Jasper curled into the usual pile, Sugar against his chest, Milo tucked beneath his foreleg, Pepper snoring at his back, but his head rested on Clyde's withers, where the old gelding had laid down beside them. A dog who was a horse who never stopped being a dog, and somehow, all of it made perfect sense. The call came just after dusk. Evan was cleaning tack when his phone buzzed on the shelf, screen glowing with the name of an old friend from Wyoming, a horse sanctuary. One Evan had donated hay to in rough winters, but never expected to hear from like this. They had orphans, 5 foals, all under a year, found scattered across 2 counties after a wildfire pushed wild herds into chaos. Most had lost their mothers. Some had seen too much. None were bonding with surrogate mares, not eating, not responding, but they'd seen a video of Jasper, playing fetch, barking, lying in a dog pile like he didn't know what species meant. Would he come, the woman asked, even just for a visit? Evan looked across the yard. Jasper was trying to balance a stick on his nose while Milo barked instructions. Clyde grazed nearby, pretending not to watch. "Yeah," Evan said. He'd come. The trailer ride was quiet. Clyde stood steady in back, Jasper beside him, and behind them, in Evan's truck, 4 dogs rode with tails thumping, Moose's head sticking out the window like a flag. When they arrived, the sanctuary staff waited in silence. They'd prepared for a horse. They weren't ready for this. Jasper stepped out like he owned the place, ears high, tail flicking, Sugar beside him, and Milo trotting circles around his legs. He let out his signature bark nicker, then stretched like Pepper always did before a long day. The foals were kept in a nearby corral, watching from the shadows. At first, nothing. Then one, small gray shaking, took a step forward. Jasper didn't rush. He lowered his head and play bowed, a slow, careful motion. No dominance, no pressure. The foal tilted her head. Then another step. Jasper trotted in a wide arc, tail high, then came back with a clump of hay in his mouth, and dropped it at her feet. Sugar mirrored him, laying down nearby, relaxed. Milo barked once, then sat. Clyde remained still behind the fence, a steady presence watching it all unfold. By sundown, all 5 foals were standing near Jasper, sniffing, nudging. One even copied him, lifting a stick like it meant something, and maybe it did. Because Jasper didn't act like a threat, he didn't act like a horse. He acted like them, scared, curious, looking for home. By the 3rd day the orphans were eating. One began sleeping beside Sugar. Another followed Milo like a shadow. Jasper nickered when they got too far and barked when they startled, both voices now his own. Evan stood by the fence, arms folded, eyes misted. "He's not visiting," he said quietly. "He's working." And for the first time since the stormy morning Jasper came into his life, Evan saw what he truly was, not confused, not broken, but a bridge. Wren was the smallest of the 5, all legs and nerves, with a dappled coat that looked like clouds had touched her. She flinched at shadows, refused touch, and spent the first few days pressed against the far fence, eyes darting like she expected the ground to vanish beneath her. But she watched Jasper, every move, every twitch, every swish of his tail. When he rolled in the dust, she watched. When he trotted beside Sugar or nudged Clyde's shoulder in greeting, she inched closer. And when Jasper bark-nickered at the sunrise and flopped onto his side like Milo did during lazy afternoons, something shifted in her. Her ears came forward, her shoulders relaxed. By the end of the week she was trailing behind him like a second shadow. The first time she touched him, it was barely more than a breath, her nose against his flank, quick and trembling. Jasper didn't move, didn't startle. He just dropped his head, and nickered low, gentle, reassuring, and then slowly laid down in the dirt, not in a horse sprawl, in a curl, dog style. Ren watched, and then unbelievably did the same. The staff froze. One of the techs dropped her clipboard. Evan, leaning on the fence, just smiled. "Well, I'll be..." From that day on, Ren was never far from him. She ate when he ate, laid down when he did, and when Jasper trotted toward the sanctuary gate for fetch hour, Ren trotted beside him, mimicking his uneven dog-taught rhythm. She even tried to carry a stick once, tripping over her own hooves, as she proudly dragged a branch twice her size. Evan watched, as she stood beside Jasper one morning, both facing the herd. A volunteer horse approached cautiously, ears forward, tail soft. Jasper stepped forward, and lowered his head in a calm, practiced greeting, and then before the other horse reached them, Ren did the same angle, same breath, like a mirror. But it wasn't just horse behavior. Later that evening, Jasper dropped into a playbow, near the paddock, knees bent, rump up, tail flicking. Ren dropped into her own version, not perfect, not fluid, but familiar, and that was when Evan saw it, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper. Jasper had once copied every move Moose and Pepper made, had once barked, not knowing why, chased tennis balls without understanding the game. He had learned to belong by watching, by trusting, and now, someone else was learning from him, a scared little filly who didn't know where she fit, until a colt, who thought he was a dog, showed her how to stand, how to bow, and how to believe that maybe she didn't have to choose a world, she could make her own. The offer came with the kind of reverence usually reserved for monuments or miracles. The sanctuary director stood beside Evan at the fence, watching Jasper lead a game of chase, Ren bounding behind him, the other foals giving half-hearted trots before collapsing in the grass. Jasper bark-nickered encouragement, tail swishing like he didn't know the weight of the moment. "We'd like to make it official," she said softly. "Jasper's changed everything. The way these foals respond to him, it's unlike anything we've seen. He belongs here." Evan didn't answer right away. He just watched as Ren gently grabbed the end of a rope toy and tugged while Jasper pretended to lose. Back at the truck, Sugar napped in the front seat, head on Evan's jacket. Milo dozed on the dash. Moose and Pepper stood near the barn, still, but alert, like they knew something was being decided. Evan exhaled slowly. "He does belong here," he said. But later that night, alone in the bunkhouse, he sat on the edge of the bed, hand resting on Jasper's collar, an old dog collar Moose had given up, looped loosely around the colt's neck, like a badge of honor. He remembered bottle feedings. First play bows. That ridiculous day Jasper tried to scratch behind his ear and fell over sideways into a pile of tennis balls. He thought about the way Jasper still curled up with the pack every night. One hoof across Sugar's back, Milo tucked under his belly like a pup hiding from thunder. He couldn't say goodbye. Not really. The next morning, Evan made the call. "We'll do both," he said. "You get him half the week, we get him the other half." There was silence on the other end, then quiet laughter. I think that's exactly what he'd want. So a new rhythm began. 3 days at the sanctuary, Jasper the bridge, the healer, the colt who spoke in barks and whinnies, who taught foals to play and grieve and trust again. 4 days at the ranch, Jasper the brother, the watchdog, the fetch partner, the dog who happened to weigh 800 pounds and sometimes stole Milo's spot in the sun. Each transition was seamless. When Evan's truck pulled into the sanctuary, Jasper stepped down like a coach returning to the team. When they pulled back into the ranch, he barked before his hooves hit dirt. Moose always the first to greet him with a head bump to the chest. At night, the pile reformed without question. Horse and dogs, fur and mane, hearts beating close. And as Evan stood by the porch, arms crossed, eyes soft in the moonlight, he knew something with absolute certainty. This wasn't a goodbye, it never had to be. They called him the dog horse. It started as a local nickname, something the sanctuary kids whispered between giggles, as Jasper chased tennis balls across the pasture, tail flicking like joy had weight. But the videos changed everything. A horse who played fetch, who barked at mail trucks, who comforted orphaned foals by lying beside them like a golden retriever on guard duty. Dr. Lonnie Ortiz's research paper went viral. Cross-species identity formation and emotional translation. The Jasper phenomenon. Headlines followed. podcasts, a documentary, a children's book. People from every corner of the world came to see him, not just because he was unusual, because he was kind. Jasper didn't know fame. He didn't care about interviews or cameras, or the articles printed in 6 languages. He only cared that Milo still squeaked when he stepped on his tail, that Sugar let him lick her ears when he got anxious, that Pepper still herded him away from puddles like he might drown in 2 inches of water. At the ranch, things remained simple. Every week, Evan trailed him to the sanctuary, where Jasper worked like clockwork, greeting each new foal with his bark nicker, nudging skittish ones forward with Clyde's old patience, still offering sticks as peace offerings no one quite understood. And every week, Jasper came home, to his porch, to his pile, to Evan's voice calling across the field, "Come on, big guy, dinner's up." The sanctuary kept a mural of him on their barn wall, Jasper mid-gallop, flanked by 3 giggling foals and a blur of dogs. But Evan didn't need paintings. He had moments. Like the way Jasper curled himself into a near-perfect circle beside the fire pit, tail swishing in rhythm with Milo's snores, or the way he barked softly in his sleep, when he laced in, a foot in each world, but never lost in either. That fall, Dr. Ortiz visited the ranch one last time. She brought a leather-bound copy of her final study, along with a plaque engraved with Jasper's name and the words proof that belonging is not bred, it's built. She found him in the field, lying with Sugar's head on his shoulder. Pepper watched the gate. Milo had a stick in his mouth, tail spinning like a wind-up toy. "You changed everything," she whispered, resting her hand on Jasper's neck. He didn't move, didn't need to. That night, Evan stood in the doorway, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the same sight he'd seen for years now. 4 souls tangled in warmth, fur and hooves, ears and tails, no lines, no questions, just family. And as Jasper exhaled into the stillness, half bark, half whinny, Evan smiled to himself, because it was never about what Jasper was, it was about who he chose to love. And that made all the difference. If Jasper's story moved you, if it reminded you that family isn't about species, but about love, loyalty, and showing up when it matters, then don't let this be the end of the trail. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Milo, lol swan, leave a comment for Jasper and his pack. We read every word, and if you believe the world needs more bridges like him, subscribe to Horse Tales of Wonder for more unforgettable true stories that heal, inspire, and remind us what really matters.